Layers of learning. That is going to be the topic of this episode of Chi Life. So I'm continuing on with different topics for the vlog that came out of the workshops that I've recently done in and around Melbourne. And this is one that I guess it kind of came up after one of the workshops, because the different workshops that I did, they were all co-organized and some of them even co-facilitated by Long White Cloud Qigong instructors who have done courses with Long White Cloud Qigong before. And so yeah, they took a role in organizing and sometimes even presenting part of those workshops, which is great to be able to spend time with those instructors and see how they're doing and getting a feel for their own personal style of teaching and things like that. And so in one of these workshops, one of these instructors is actually currently on another Long White Cloud Qigong course. So they've previously done one of the courses and started teaching on the basis of what they've learned from that. And they're learning more. They're exploring some of the other practices. And in this workshop, we actually did we did several of the practices that are part of the course that they're currently studying now. And because they're currently studying that course, that means that, still participating in the regular Q&As and things that we have as part of that course. And so in the Q&A session, after the workshop, she commented and just sort of raised it as something to discuss or mention to other people on the course about one of the aspects of one of the movements that we did within the workshop as part of one of these practices, and some of the benefits and effects of that particular movement. It was a Wuji Qigong practice in particular. And she said she wasn't sure if she missed it in the materials, but just the way that I had talked about that in the workshop had made it really stand out to her. And so she wanted to raise it and bring it to, the other course participants' attention so that, make sure that they were aware of it, because it was, a beautiful part of that practice. And so we had some discussion around that, and it certainly is something that I did talk about quite clearly, quite prominently within the course materials, because it is a key benefit that relates to this one particular movement. And it's one of those more subtle things. It's not just a physical benefit. It affects our energy, it affects our psychology, it affects how we interact with the world around us. But yeah, one of the clear, deeper benefits of this movement. But yeah, she had kind of missed it, or at the very least, doing it together in the workshop, with me leading the workshop and guiding the movement and talking about it, brought it out to her in a much richer way, that if she had, noticed it before, that she couldn't even remember it, because it stood out much more strongly. And this is a natural thing. With whatever we do, and this applies particularly to Qigong, but it really applies to anything we do in life, there are layers of learning. Because we can only take in what we're ready to take in. And often, to understand some things, we need to have a framework of understanding of other things, other principles, in order to locate that properly and truly comprehend it. And Qigong being a really, often quite subtle, quite nuanced practice where we're tuning into quite subtle things, our awareness builds little by little by little. And there's a lot of aspects of the practice that to begin with might just go right over our heads, but as we develop some experience, little by little, we can start to comprehend them, and they're meaningful to us. And so even when we are told about these aspects of the practice, or we read about them, or they're demonstrated, if we're not ready to understand them, they just slip right on by us. And this is a natural thing, and it's not a problem, it's just natural. And so what typically happens with people on the courses is, of course, they go through and they work through. We have there's tons of pre-recorded videos demonstrating things, talking about things in the course material. There's lots of written material describing all of the principles, all of that sort of thing. Then in addition to that, we have regular Q&A sessions, as I mentioned, and they go through and they work through all of this material. And then as well as that, we have group practice sessions where we practice together and they're led through the practices. So there's all this, and they'll pick up lots of different details as they go through. And some of it they'll pick up from the videos, they'll pick up other things from the written material. Even though the videos and written material kind of cover the same stuff, they'll draw different things out of each of it. And then in the group practice sessions, again, even though it's all covered in the course material, they'll get other things out of that because they're now experiencing the practices in a different way. Maybe they've already had some time to work with them, they've got a certain amount of understanding, then being led through them, some different things come more to the fore for them. And so little by little they develop their understanding. But then at the end of the course, they've come all the way to the end, well, we have assessments. And I've talked about previously about why we do these assessments, why I think it's a really important part of the learning process, because then they get an opportunity to go back over everything that they've learned in the course and review it, and as part of that, draw out even more things. You know, part of it is recognizing how much they do know and understand at that point, which is fantastic. It consolidates their knowledge. But for some things, you go like, oh, hey, I missed that. So somehow it didn't stand out to me. And so often as part of that, they, go back through, look at different parts of the material to bring those things, back to the front of their memory. And this really gives them a good overview, understanding of all the practices. But even after all of that, it's very common for students to, because the practices are really rich. There's like a lot of information, a lot of detail, and really rich practices as well. It's very common for course participants to, months later, years later, go back and review the course material again and find completely new things in there, new things to them. It was always there in the course material, but that they would have read, would have seen, would have listened to, but they didn't have a sufficient base of knowledge to truly take it and comprehend it at that point. And so when they go through again, new layers of understanding. And look, this process continues even beyond that. It's not just about the course material and things like that. It continues even just as a natural part of continuing to do the practices. Just from your own observation, there's layers and layers and layers, and more comes out over time. For myself, there are a variety of practices that I've been doing for decades at this point. And still, with those practices, to be fair, it gets less often over time. It takes more time in between new insights. But still, with these practices, I've been doing them for decades. And when I review them and I go back and work with them some more at different points, new things come out. And like, something I hadn't really noticed before. Some part of it I hadn't fully grasped before. And it's just part of the constant process of learning. And I think to some people this can, if they haven't really thought about this much before, they haven't really observed it, they can be a bit concerned about this because but I don't know everything yet, or like how did I miss that? It's nothing to be worried about. There's levels, there's layers. You'll take in what you're ready for at a given time, and then when you're ready for more, you'll be able to understand more and understand more. And you can take a different view of this instead of being worried about, I don't know everything. And that it makes it so fascinating to continue to explore, to continue to work with these practices, even very simple practices, and little by little go deeper and deeper, more and more layers, gain more and more insights. It makes it a beautiful thing to continue to work with. And it really reinforces the gong part of Qigong. Qi, energy, gong, work or skill. There's an implication, there's work, that it develops over time as we go deeper and deeper. More comes out, because many of the Qigong practices, some of them are pretty sophisticated, but many of them, at least on a surface level, appear to be very simple. But there's a lot going on underneath them, and this reveals itself little by little with time as you continue to practice. Anyway, maybe an interesting topic for today. I look forward to seeing you on another vlog soon.